In the glittering world of New York's elite, where love is a commodity and betrayal is a currency, a pregnant wife becomes a pawn in a billionaire's twisted game. Accused of embezzling millions to save his scheming mistress, she finds her perfect life shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. He was her everything, the man who vowed to protect her and their unborn child. But when faced with a choice, he didn't just choose another woman. He chose to condemn his own family. This is a story of love lies and the ultimate deception. How far will a man go to protect his secrets? And what will a woman do when she has nothing left to lose? The city that never slept was a concrete jungle. And I, Anya Petrova, had been its queen. Or so I thought. From the penthouse of our Fifth Avenue apartment, the world looked like a glittering tapestry woven with the lights of 1,000,000 dreams. My husband, Julian Croft, the titan of tech, had not just given me a life of unimaginable luxury. He had given me a love I believed was as real and enduring as the skyline. Now 8 months pregnant with our first child, a son, I felt like the sun around which his entire world revolved. That illusion so carefully crafted shattered on a Tuesday. It was a day that began like any other. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden glow on the minimalist yet opulent decor of our home. I was in the nursery, a room painted in hues of soft blue and cream, arranging a tiny pair of hand-knitted booties on a shelf. A wave of love so fierce it was almost painful washed over me as I imagined our son's tiny feet in them. Julian had left early, a kiss pressed to my forehead, and a murmur about a crucial meeting with the board of his company Innovate Inc. There was a slight tension in his shoulders that I had dismissed as work stress. How naive I had been. The first tremor in my perfect world came in the form of a phone call. It was our private banker, a man named Mr. Abernathy. His voice unusually strained. "Mrs. Croft," he began, his tone laced with a discomfort that sent a chill down my spine. "There have been some irregularities with your personal accounts." I frowned, one hand instinctively going to my swollen belly. "Irregularities? What do you mean?" "A series of large transfers, Mrs. Croft, to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, totaling $10 million. The booties slipped from my hand. $10 million? That's impossible. I haven't authorized any such transfers. The authorizations bear your digital signature, Mrs. Croft," he said, his voice now colder, more professional. "We have to report this." Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at my throat. There must be some mistake. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Julian. He had access to everything, every password, every digital key. But why? The second tremor, the one that brought the whole gilded structure crashing down, arrived 2 hours later in the form of 2 grim-faced men in dark suits. They were from the district attorney's office. "Anya Petrova Croft," the taller one asked, his eyes devoid of any emotion. I nodded, my heart hammering against my ribs. "You're under arrest for embezzlement and wire fraud." The words hung in the air, sharp and deadly like shards of glass. Embezzlement. From my own husband's company. It was ludicrous, a scene from a bad movie. "This is a mistake," I whispered, my voice trembling. "My husband, Julian, will clear this up." A bitter smile touched the man's lips. "Ma'am, it was your husband who brought this to our attention." The ground beneath me seemed to fall away. Julian. My Julian, who had held me just this morning, whispering promises of forever. It couldn't be. But it was. The world I knew dissolved into a blur of flashing lights, the cold click of handcuffs, and the mortified whispers of our building staff. I was paraded out like a common criminal, the city lights now seeming to mock my descent. The interrogation room was a stark, cold contrast to my luxurious life. The air was stale, thick with the scent of cheap coffee and despair. Across the table, Detectives Harding and Miller stared at me, their faces impassive masks. "Let's go over this one more time, Mrs. Croft," Harding said, his voice a low growl. $10 million. Transferred from Innovate Inc.'s charity foundation to an account in your name, then funneled offshore, all within the last 3 months. "I didn't do it," I repeated, my voice hoarse. "I've told you, I have no idea how this happened." Miller slid a file across the table. It was filled with printouts of transactions, digital signatures that mimicked mine flawlessly, and a photograph that made my blood run cold. It was a picture of a woman. A stunningly beautiful woman with fiery red hair and eyes the color of emeralds. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a look of pure adoration on her face. Next to her, his arm wrapped possessively around her waist, was Julian. "Who is she?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Her name is Isabella Rossi," Harding supplied. "An art dealer. A very successful one, it seems. Especially since she started seeing your husband." The pieces of the puzzle began to click into place, each one a fresh stab of betrayal. The late-night meetings, the hushed phone calls, the sudden business trips. It hadn't been work that had kept Julian away. It had been her. "He's having an affair." I stated the words, tasting like ash in my mouth. "More than an affair, Mrs. Croft," Miller said, leaning forward. "Isabella Rossi has a penchant for the finer things in life, particularly diamonds. Ever heard of the Muawad l'incomparable? Diamond necklace." My breath hitched. Of course I had. It was one of the most expensive necklaces in the world, a breathtaking cascade of flawless diamonds valued at over $55 million. It had been in the news, recently sold at a private auction in Geneva. "We have reason to believe," Harding continued, his gaze piercing, "that the embezzled funds were a down payment for that very necklace, a gift for his mistress." A wave of nausea washed over me. He had stolen from his own company's charity, a foundation meant to help underprivileged children, to buy a trinket for his lover. And he was framing me for it. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, it left me breathless. This wasn't just about infidelity. This was a calculated act of cruelty, a public execution of my character to save his own. He was not just destroying our marriage. He was destroying me, and with me the future of our unborn child. The interrogation continued for hours, a relentless barrage of questions and accusations. They painted a picture of a greedy, scorned wife, lashing out at her husband by stealing from him. They twisted my life, my love, into a sordid tale of revenge. Finally, they allowed me to make one phone call. My hands shook so badly, I could barely dial the number. It was Julian's personal line, the one he had always answered no matter what. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then his voice, smooth and controlled, came on the line. "Julian Croft." "Julian," I cried, tears streaming down my face. "It's Anya. They've arrested me. They're saying I stole money. You have to help me. You have to tell them it's a mistake." There was a pause, a beat of silence that stretched into an eternity. Then his voice, colder than I had ever heard it, cut through me. "Anya," he said, and the warmth, the love I had cherished was gone, replaced by an icy disdain. "You've brought this upon yourself. You were always so extravagant. I warned you." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, the dial tone a mournful wail in my ears. He had admitted it. Not in so many words, but in the chilling finality of his tone. He had chosen her. He had sacrificed me and our son on the altar of his lust and greed. That night in a cold, sterile cell, the reality of my situation crashed down on me. I was alone, pregnant, and facing a prison sentence for a crime I didn't commit. The man I had loved more than life itself had become my executioner. The media frenzy was instantaneous and brutal. "Billionaire's pregnant wife in embezzlement scandal," the headline screamed. My face was plastered everywhere, a symbol of fallen grace. The Queen of New York had become its pariah. My lawyer, a court-appointed public defender named Sarah Jenkins, was a weary-looking woman with kind eyes. She listened to my story, her expression a mixture of pity and skepticism. "It's a tough case, Anya," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Julian Croft is a powerful man. He has the best lawyers, the best Purdute team money can buy. They've already painted a narrative, and right now you're the villain." "But I'm innocent," I insisted, my voice cracking. "I believe you," she said, and for the first time a flicker of hope ignited within me. "But believing you and proving it are two very different things. We need evidence, something to counter their claims." Evidence. How could I find evidence when I was trapped in this nightmare, my assets frozen, my reputation in tatters? The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings, court appearances, and sleepless nights. The weight of the accusation pressed down on me, suffocating me. The baby, my son, was a constant fluttering reminder of what I was fighting for. I had to be strong for him. The preliminary hearing was a circus. The courtroom was packed with reporters, their cameras flashing like 1,000 tiny explosions. Julian was there, looking every inch the wronged husband. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his face a mask of sorrow and betrayal. He couldn't even look at me. His lawyers presented their case, a meticulously crafted web of lies. They showed the digital signatures, the offshore account, in a name that was a cruel twist of my own. Anya Petrova International. They even had a witness, a disgruntled former employee from Innovate Inc., who testified that I had a gambling problem, that I was drowning in debt. It was all lies, but they were presented with such conviction, such authority, that even I started to doubt my own sanity. When it was my turn, I took the stand, my hand resting on my belly, a silent plea to the jury. I told them the truth, my voice shaking but clear. I spoke of my love for Julian, of my excitement for our baby, of the impossibility of me committing such a crime. I looked at Julian then, a direct appeal to the man I had once known. "Julian," I said, my voice breaking, "now please tell them the truth." For a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Guilt. Remorse. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that same icy resolve. He shook his head, a single devastating gesture that sealed my fate. The judge set bail at an astronomical $10 million, the exact amount I was accused of stealing. It was a sum I couldn't possibly pay. I was to be remanded in custody until the trial. As they led me away, I caught a glimpse of her. Isabella Rossi. She was sitting in the back of the courtroom, a vision in a blood-red dress, a smug, triumphant smile playing on her lips. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I saw the true face of evil. She had won. She had my husband, my life, my freedom. And I had nothing. Nothing but a broken heart, a tarnished name, and the unborn child who was my only reason to keep fighting. The gilded cage had become a real one, and the man who had put me there was the same one who held the key. But I would not be broken. I would find a way to expose their lies, to reclaim my life, and to protect my son. The queen had been dethroned, but the fight for her kingdom had just begun. The iron doors of the Metropolitan Detention Center clanged shut behind me, the sound echoing the finality of my fall from grace. The stench of disinfectant and despair filled my nostrils, a stark contrast to the fragrant scent of fresh flowers that had once filled my penthouse. My designer clothes were replaced with a drab, ill-fitting jumpsuit, a constant reminder of my new reality. I was no longer Anya Petrova Croft, the beloved wife of a billionaire. I was inmate number 734, a woman accused, abandoned, and fighting for a future that seemed to be slipping through my fingers like grains of sand. The first few weeks were a blur of suffocating fear and crushing loneliness. The other inmates, a motley crew of women whose faces were etched with stories of hardship and loss, viewed me with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. To them I was the billionaire's wife, a princess who had fallen from her ivory tower. They didn't see the terror that kept me awake at night, the gnawing anxiety for my unborn child, the raw, gaping wound of Julian's betrayal. My only lifeline was Sarah Jenkins, my public defender. She was a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. Despite her weary exterior, she possessed a fierce intelligence and a dogged determination that I clung to. "They're trying to fast-track the trial, Anya," she told me during one of our meetings in the bleak, windowless visiting room. "Julian's lawyers are pushing for a quick conviction. They want this over and done with before the baby comes. Because a pregnant woman on trial for embezzlement is a bad look for him." I asked, my voice dripping with a sarcasm I didn't know I possessed. Sarah nodded, her expression grim. "Exactly. They're painting you as a desperate, unstable woman, a flight risk. That's why the bail was set so high. They want to keep you locked up and silenced." "So what do we do?" I asked, my voice trembling. "How do we fight this? We need to find a crack in their story," she said, her eyes narrowing in concentration. "Something that proves you weren't the one who made those transfers. We need to find out who Anya Petrova International really is." The name was a cruel mockery, a twisted version of my own, designed to point the finger directly at me. It was a masterstroke of deception, and I had no doubt that Isabella Rossi was the artist behind it. My days settled into a grim routine. I spent hours in the prison library, poring over legal books, trying to understand the intricacies of my case. I attended mandatory counseling sessions, where I listened to the heartbreaking stories of other women, their lives shattered by poverty, addiction, and abuse. For the first time, I began to see the world outside my gilded cage, a world of pain and injustice that I had been blind to. One afternoon, a package arrived for me. It was from my estranged mother, a woman I hadn't spoken to in years. We had fallen out after my father's death, our grief creating a chasm between us that seemed impossible to bridge. My marriage to Julian, a man she had never approved of, had only widened the divide. With trembling hands, I opened the box. Inside, nestled amongst tissue paper, was a collection of my father's old things, his favorite worn, leather-bound book of Russian poetry, a tarnished silver locket with a faded picture of my parents on their wedding day, and a small, intricately carved wooden bird. A note written in my mother's elegant script lay on top. Anya, it read. I know we have not spoken in a long time, but you are my daughter, and I will not abandon you. Your father always said that even in the darkest of nights, there is always a star to guide you. Find your star, my love. Fight for your son. Fight for the truth. Tears streamed down my face as I clutched the locket to my chest. It was a reminder of a time when love was simple and unconditional, a stark contrast to the twisted, conditional love Julian had offered me. My father, a history professor with a passion for justice, had always taught me to stand up for what is right, to fight against injustice no matter the cost. His memory, and my mother's unexpected gesture of support, reignited the embers of my fighting spirit. I decided to take a different approach. If Julian and Isabella had fabricated a digital trail, then there had to be a real-world trail as well. Someone had to have set up the offshore account. Someone had to have facilitated the transfers. I started to think back, to comb through my memories of the past few months, searching for anything out of the ordinary. The late-night meetings, the hushed phone calls. Who had Julian been talking to? And then I remembered a name Julian had mentioned in passing, a name that had seemed insignificant at the time. Mr. Silas, he had said, is a man who can make problems disappear. I gave the name to Sarah, a flicker of excitement in my voice. Find him, Sarah. Find this Mr. Silas. Sarah, ever the pragmatist, was cautious. It's a long shot, Anya, but I'll see what I can do. Meanwhile, the trial date loomed closer, a guillotine poised to sever me from my future. The media continued its relentless assault, publishing salacious stories about my supposed gambling addiction, my extravagant spending, my unstable mental state. They were building a narrative brick by brick that would entomb me. One evening, as I was lying on my cot, my hand resting on my belly, feeling the gentle kicks of my son, a guard's voice startled me. Inmate 734. You have a visitor. My heart leapt. Could it be Julian? Had he finally come to his senses? But the man who sat opposite me in the visiting room was not my husband. He was a stranger, tall and impeccably dressed, with cold, calculating eyes that seemed to see right through me. Mrs. Croft, he said, his voice a low, menacing purr. My name is Arthur Vance. I'm a colleague of your husband's. I have nothing to say to you, I said, my voice cold. He smiled, a predatory gleam in his eyes. Oh, I think you do. You see, Julian is a man who values loyalty, and he feels that you have been disloyal. He's the one who betrayed me. I spat, my anger overriding my fear. A matter of perspective, he said, waving a dismissive hand. The fact is, you are in a very precarious position, a position that could be rectified. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Julian is prepared to offer you a deal. Plead guilty. Take the fall. In return, he will ensure that you receive a lenient sentence, a few years, perhaps, in a comfortable minimum security facility. Your son will be well taken care of. You will want for nothing upon your release. The audacity of his offer left me speechless. He wanted me to willingly sacrifice my life, my freedom, for a crime I didn't commit, to protect him and his mistress. And if I refuse, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. His smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. Then the full weight of the law will come down upon you. You will be convicted. You will lose your son. He will be raised by his father, and his new mother. The unspoken threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. He was talking about Isabella. The thought of her raising my child of my son, calling another woman mother, was a knife to the heart. "You're a monster," I whispered, my voice choked with revulsion. He chuckled a dry, humorless sound. "I'm a pragmatist, Mrs. Croft, just like your husband. Think about it. It's the best deal you're going to get." He stood up, adjusted his tie, and walked away, leaving me trembling with a mixture of rage and terror. The next day, Sarah burst into the visiting room, her face flushed with excitement. "I found him. Anya, I found Mr. Silas." My heart hammered against my ribs. "And his real name is Silas Blackwood," she said, her voice a triumphant whisper. "He's a fixer for the rich and powerful, a man who specializes in creating alternate realities. He's a ghost, Anya. No social security number, no credit cards, no digital footprint. But I found something." She slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a flight manifest for a private jet from New York to Geneva. The date was 3 months ago, the same week the Muawad, l'incomparable diamond necklace was sold at auction. And there on the passenger list were 2 names, Julian Croft and Isabella Rossi. But it was the 3rd name that made my blood run cold. The name of the man who had chartered the flight, the man who had accompanied them on their little shopping trip. Mr. Silas Blackwood. It was the crack we had been looking for, the first tangible piece of evidence that linked Julian and Isabella to the crime. But it wasn't enough. We needed more. We needed to find Silas Blackwood. We needed him to talk. Sarah, however, had another idea. "Blackwood is a ghost, Anya. He's not going to be easy to find. But there's someone else. Someone who might be more cooperative." She slid another photograph across the table. It was of a young woman barely out of her teens with wide, frightened eyes and a haunted expression. "Her name is Chloe," Sarah said. "She was Isabella's personal assistant, until last month when she was fired without any explanation." "Why?" I asked. "That's what we need to find out," Sarah said, a determined glint in her eyes. "I have a feeling that Chloe knows more than she's letting on. She might be the key to unlocking this whole conspiracy." A new sense of purpose filled me. Chloe. She was a loose end, a potential weak link in Julian and Isabella's carefully constructed chain of lies. If we could get her to talk, we might have a fighting chance. But finding her wouldn't be easy, and convincing her to testify against a man as powerful and ruthless as Julian Croft would be even harder. That night, as I lay in my cell, I clutched the silver locket my mother had sent me. The cold metal was a comforting weight in my hand, a tangible link to a past filled with love and a future I was determined to reclaim. The serpent, Isabella, had wrapped her coils around my life, her venomous kiss poisoning everything I held dear. But I was not her victim. I was a survivor, and I would not rest until I had exposed her for the snake she was, and brought the man I had once loved to justice. The fight for my son, for my freedom, for the truth was far from over. It had just entered a new, more dangerous phase. The air in the visiting room was thick with a tension that was almost palpable. Across the table from me and Sarah sat Chloe, Isabella Rossi's former personal assistant. She was a bundle of nerves, her hands twisting a crumpled tissue in her lap, her eyes darting around the room as if she expected Julian to materialize from the shadows. It had taken Sarah 2 weeks of relentless searching to find her. Chloe had gone to ground after being fired, disappearing from her apartment, and disconnecting her phone. Sarah had finally tracked her down to a dingy motel on the outskirts of the city, where she was living under an assumed name. "I can't talk to you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You don't understand. They'll ruin me." "They've already ruined me, Chloe," I said, my voice gentle but firm. I leaned forward, trying to meet her gaze. "I'm pregnant. I'm facing years in prison for a crime I didn't commit. My husband, the man I loved, has thrown me to the wolves to protect his mistress, your former boss." Chloe flinched at the mention of Isabella. A flicker of something, fear, anger, guilt, crossed her face. "I know you're scared," Sarah said, her tone calm and reassuring. "But you have a choice. You can let them get away with it, or you can help us expose the truth." Chloe shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "You don't know what she's like, Isabella. She's not just a beautiful woman. She's a black widow. She spins these intricate webs, and once you're caught, there's no escape." "What did she do to you, Chloe?" I asked softly. Chloe took a shuddering breath, her story tumbling out in a torrent of whispered words. She spoke of Isabella's insatiable greed, her manipulative nature, her cruel and vindictive streak. She described how Isabella had systematically isolated Julian from his friends and family, how she had poisoned his mind against me, planting seeds of doubt and suspicion. She was obsessed with the Muawad l'incomparable necklace, Chloe whispered. Her voice filled with a mixture of awe and revulsion. She called it her destiny. She said it was the one thing that would solidify her position in Julian's life, the one thing that would make her untouchable. "And the embezzled money," Sarah pressed. "Did you know about that?" Chloe hesitated, her eyes wide with fear. I saw things, emails, encrypted messages. They were always so careful, but sometimes they got sloppy." She told us about a secret laptop, one that Isabella kept hidden in a safe in her art gallery. A laptop that contained, Chloe believed, all of their secrets. "She called it her insurance policy," Chloe said, her voice trembling. "She said it had enough information to ruin a dozen powerful men, including Julian. It was the smoking gun we had been looking for. A digital treasure trove of evidence that could exonerate me and expose Julian and Isabella for the criminals they were." "Can you get it for us?" I asked, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. Chloe recoiled, shaking her head vehemently. "No, it's impossible. The gallery is like a fortress, and the safe, you need a key card and a biometric scan to open it." "Isabella's fingerprint," Sarah murmured, her brow furrowed in thought. A desperate plan began to form in my mind, a plan so audacious, so risky, that it took my breath away. "I can get it," I said, my voice filled with a newfound resolve. Sarah and Chloe stared at me, as if I had lost my mind. "Anya, you're on bail," Sarah said, her voice a mixture of concern and disbelief. "You're wearing an ankle monitor. You can't go anywhere near that gallery." "I know," I said, my mind racing. "But I have an idea." The plan was simple in its concept, but fiendishly complex in its execution. It involved a charity gala, a stolen keycard, a latex glove, and a whole lot of luck. The annual Children of Hope Gala, hosted by Innovate Inc.'s charity foundation, was one of the most prestigious events on the New York social calendar. It was also the perfect opportunity. Julian and Isabella would be there, basking in the spotlight, playing the part of the grieving husband and his supportive friend. My bail conditions had been unexpectedly relaxed. After the visit from Arthur Vance, a new motion had been filed by Julian's legal team, arguing that my continued incarceration was causing undue stress on the pregnancy. The judge, swayed by a carefully worded medical report from a doctor on Julian's payroll, had agreed to release me on house arrest. I was still a prisoner, but now my cage was gilded once more. The move was designed to make Julian look compassionate, a man still concerned for the mother of his child. For me, it was the opening I needed. The first step was to get an invitation to the gala. That's where Chloe came in. Despite her fear, a spark of defiance had been ignited within her. She still had contacts at the gallery, a network of disgruntled employees who had also been burned by Isabella's ambition. A discreetly placed bribe, funded by the last of my mother's savings, secured a catering uniform and a staff pass for Chloe. The second step was the key card. Chloe knew that Isabella always kept her gallery key card in a specific clutch bag when she attended evening events, a bag that would at some point be left unattended on their table. The third and most crucial step was the biometric scan. How could we get Isabella's fingerprint? The answer came to me in a flash of inspiration, a memory of a society event from a year ago. A champagne flute. Isabella, ever the drama queen, had a habit of holding her glass in a particular way, her index finger pressed against the bowl. The night of the gala, my heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I sat in my apartment watching the live stream of the event on my laptop, my ankle monitor a cold, heavy weight on my leg. I was a puppet master, pulling the strings from afar, my fate in the hands of a terrified young woman. Chloe, dressed in a crisp white uniform, moved through the glittering crowd, her face a mask of calm professionalism. She was a ghost in the machine, invisible to the very people she was there to betray. I watched as Julian took the stage, his voice filled with a faux sincerity as he spoke about the importance of charity, of helping those less fortunate. He even had the audacity to mention me, his beloved wife, expressing his profound sadness at my current struggles. The hypocrisy was so thick I could almost taste it. Then the camera panned to Isabella. She was a vision in emerald green, the color of envy, a triumphant smile on her lips. She raised her champagne flute in a toast. Her index finger pressed against the glass just as I had predicted. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Chloe. "I have it. The glass." My breath hitched. Phase 1 was complete. Now for the key card. I watched the screen with an intensity that made my head ache. I saw Julian and Isabella get up to dance, leaving their table, and Isabella's clutch unattended. "Now, Chloe, now," I whispered to the screen. Chloe moved with a practiced ease, her tray of canapés a perfect cover. A stumble, a spill, a flurry of apologies, and in the confusion the clutch was hers. Another buzz. Got it. Heading to the gallery. The next hour was the longest of my life. I paced the length of my apartment, my mind a whirlwind of what-ifs. What if she got caught? What if the fingerprint didn't work? What if the laptop wasn't there? Finally, my phone rang. It was Chloe, her voice a breathless whisper. "I'm in. I have the laptop." A wave of relief so intense, it almost brought me to my knees, washed over me. "Get out of there, Chloe. Get out of there now." But it was too late. "Oh my God," Chloe whispered, her voice suddenly filled with terror. "He's here." "Who's here?" I demanded, my blood running cold. "Silas Blackwood." The line went dead. Panic, cold, and absolute seized me. Blackwood. The fixer. He must have been watching the gallery, a silent guardian of Isabella's secrets. I tried calling Chloe back, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I was frantic. I had to do something. And then I remembered the ankle monitor. It was a tracking device, a leash, but it was also a lifeline. I took a deep breath, walked over to the window, and with a pair of pliers I had hidden away, I cut it off. The alarm would go off in 60 seconds. 60 seconds to get out of the building into a waiting taxi I had pre-booked and disappear into the night. It was a reckless, desperate move, a violation of my bail that would undoubtedly land me back in prison. But I had no choice. Chloe had risked everything for me. I couldn't abandon her. As the taxi sped through the city streets, my heart pounded in my chest. I was a fugitive, a pregnant woman on the run, racing towards a confrontation with a dangerous man to save a young woman I barely knew. The old Anya Petrova Croft, the timid, trusting wife, was gone. In her place was a woman who had been forged in the fires of betrayal, a woman who would stop at nothing to protect the innocent and expose the guilty. The gallery was dark, a silent monolith in the sleeping city. I slipped through a side entrance that Chloe had left open, my phone's flashlight, a feeble beam in the cavernous space. The silence was eerie, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing. I found the open safe, the empty space, where the laptop had been a gaping maw. And then I saw them. In the center of the main showroom, illuminated by the cold blue light of the security monitors, stood Silas Blackwood. And at his feet, bound and gagged, was Chloe. Blackwood turned a slow, deliberate movement. He was holding the laptop. A cruel, knowing smile played on his lips. "Well, well, well," he purred, his voice a silken threat. "Look what the cat dragged in. The runaway bride. Or should I say, the runaway inmate." My blood ran cold. The thread I had been so carefully unraveling had led me straight into the spider's web. And the spider was watching me with hungry eyes. The air in the gallery was thick with the scent of expensive oil paint and palpable menace. Silas Blackwood stood before me, a predator who had cornered his prey. The laptop, our last hope, was in his hands. Chloe was his hostage. And I, a pregnant fugitive, was trapped. "I have to admit, Mrs. Croft," Blackwood said, his voice a low, chilling purr as he circled me. "I'm impressed. You're far more resourceful than Julian gave you credit for." "Let her go, Blackwood," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. My hand instinctively went to my belly, a shield for my unborn son. He laughed, a dry, humorless sound that echoed in the vast, silent space. "Let her go, but she's the star witness in my little drama. She and this," he said, patting the laptop, "are my insurance policy, just as this was Isabella's." "What do you want?" I asked, my mind racing, searching for an escape, a weakness, anything. "What I want," he said, his eyes glinting in the dim light, "is to clean up this mess. Julian and Isabella, for all their cunning, have become liabilities. They've left a trail of breadcrumbs a mile wide. The Muawad l'incomparable diamond necklace, for instance. A rather conspicuous purchase for a woman with no discernible income." He paused, letting his words hang in the air. "Julian thought he was clever framing you, but he underestimated you, and he underestimated me. So what now?" I challenged, my voice laced with a defiance I didn't feel. "You're going to kill us both. Make us disappear." He smiled, a chilling, predatory grin. "Oh no. Nothing so crude. I have a much more elegant solution in mind." He walked over to a large, abstract painting, a chaotic swirl of red and black. He pressed a spot on the frame, and a hidden panel slid open, revealing a small, soundproofed room. My blood ran cold. It was a panic room. A tomb. "You see, Mrs. Croft." He continued, his tone conversational, as if he were discussing the weather. "The narrative has already been written. A desperate, unstable, pregnant woman on the run from the law breaks into her rival's art gallery in a fit of jealous rage. There's a struggle, a tragic accident. The assistant poor girl is caught in the crossfire." My heart hammered against my ribs. He was going to stage our deaths, make it look like a murder-suicide. "And the laptop?" I asked, stalling for time. My eyes darting around the room, searching for a weapon, an escape route. "The laptop," he said with a sigh, "will unfortunately be destroyed in the ensuing fire. A tragic loss of art." He began to advance on me, a tranquilizer gun suddenly appearing in his hand. My mind screamed. I had to do something. And then I saw it. A heavy bronze sculpture, a jagged, abstract piece sitting on a pedestal near the panic room. It was my only chance. As Blackwood lunged, I sidestepped, grabbing the sculpture with all my might. It was heavier than I expected, but adrenaline coursed through my veins, giving me a strength I didn't know I possessed. I swung it with a guttural cry, catching him on the side of the head. He staggered back, a look of shocked surprise on his face. The tranquilizer gun clattered to the floor. I didn't hesitate. I ran to Chloe, my fingers fumbling with the ropes that bound her. "Run, Chloe, run!" I screamed. But Blackwood was already recovering, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He lunged for the laptop which had fallen to the floor. In that split second, I made a choice. The evidence. We needed the evidence. I shoved Chloe towards the exit. "Go call the police. Tell them everything." Then I turned to face Blackwood. He had the laptop, but I had something he didn't. Desperation. I ran not for the exit, but for the panic room. He was between me and the door, and I knew I couldn't outrun him. "Anya, no!" Chloe screamed from the doorway. I slammed the heavy door of the panic room shut just as Blackwood reached it. I heard a satisfying thud as his body hit the solid steel. I fumbled for the lock, my hands shaking. The tumblers clicked into place just as he began to pound on the door. I was safe, but I was also trapped. The panic room was small and airless. The silence broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing and the furious, muffled pounding on the door. I was alone in the dark, with no way out. And then I remembered the phone. My phone. I had dropped it when I grabbed the sculpture. It was out there with Blackwood. Despair, cold and absolute, washed over me. I had saved Chloe, but I had sacrificed myself. I had traded one prison for another. I don't know how long I was in there. Hours. A day. Time seemed to stretch and warp in the suffocating darkness. I thought about my son, about the life he would never have. I thought about Julian, the man who had set this all in motion. And then I heard a new sound. Sirens. The distant wail grew closer, louder, until it was right outside the gallery. The pounding on the door stopped. I heard muffled shouts, the sound of breaking glass, and then a new voice, a familiar voice calling my name. "Anya, Anya, are you in there?" It was Sarah. Tears of relief streamed down my face. "Sarah, I'm here. I'm in the panic room." A few minutes later, the heavy door swung open, flooding the small space with light. I stumbled out, blinking into the arms of my lawyer. The gallery was swarming with police officers. Chloe was there, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale but resolute. and in the corner in handcuffs was Silas Blackwood, a dark scowl on his face. But it was the other two figures in handcuffs that made my heart stop. Julian and Isabella. They stood there amidst the flashing lights of police cameras, their perfect world crumbling around them. Isabella was hysterical, her beautiful face contorted in a mask of rage and disbelief. Julian, my Julian, looked broken. He stared at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of shock, regret, and something else. Fear. "What happened?" I whispered to Sarah. "Chloe called me," she said, her voice filled with pride. "She told me everything. I called the police, but it was the laptop that sealed their fate." "Blackwood had it," I said, confused. Sarah smiled. "Yes, he did. But he made one fatal mistake. He underestimated Chloe. Before he caught her, she managed to start a cloud backup of the entire hard drive. It was all there, Anya. The emails, the offshore account details, the encrypted messages between Julian and Isabella. Their entire conspiracy laid bare. But it was the final piece of evidence, the one that had truly brought the house of cards crashing down, that left me breathless. "There was a video on the laptop," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "From the night of the robbery at your apartment, the night the embezzlement was discovered." My mind reeled. The security cameras in our apartment. Julian had told me they had malfunctioned that night. "They didn't malfunction," Sarah said, her eyes filled with a grim satisfaction. "Isabella recorded it. A little extra insurance in case Julian ever thought of double-crossing her." The video, which was now in the hands of the district attorney, showed Julian and Isabella in our apartment. It showed them planting the fabricated evidence on my computer. It showed them celebrating toasting with champagne as they congratulated each other on their cleverness. And then it showed something else, something that would haunt me forever. Isabella, laughing, had turned to Julian. "She'll be out of the way soon, my love," she had purred, stroking his cheek. "And we can finally be a family. You, me, and our baby. Our baby." The words echoed in my ears, a cruel, discordant melody. Sarah squeezed my hand, her expression softening with pity. "Anya, Isabella is pregnant. She's 3 months along." The final betrayal. The ultimate deception. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't just about the necklace. It was about replacing me, erasing me, stealing not just my husband, my freedom and my reputation, but my child as well. I looked at Julian, then a man I no longer recognized. The love I had once felt for him had curdled into a cold, hard knot of pity and disgust. He had not just betrayed me. He had betrayed himself, his own unborn son, for a woman who was his mirror image, a hollow shell of greed and ambition. The trial was a media sensation. The Billionaire's betrayal, they called it. The video was played for the jury, a silent, damning testament to their guilt. The evidence from the laptop, coupled with Chloe's brave testimony, was irrefutable. Julian, Isabella, and Silas Blackwood were all found guilty. Blackwood, for his role as the fixer, received a hefty sentence. Isabella, despite her pregnancy, was convicted of conspiracy, fraud, and perjury. And Julian, my husband, the man who had once been my world, he was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison for embezzlement, conspiracy, and framing an innocent person. I gave birth to my son a week after the verdict was announced. I named him Leo after my father. He was beautiful, perfect, a tiny beacon of hope in the aftermath of the storm. I sold the penthouse, the gilded cage that had almost become my tomb. I moved to a quiet, unassuming town, far from the glare of the media, far from the ghosts of my past. My mother came to live with me, her love and support a healing balm on my wounded soul. We were a family, a small, strong unit forged in the fires of adversity. I never saw Julian again. I heard that he had tried to appeal his sentence, but it was denied. He would spend the best years of his life behind bars, a prisoner of his own greed and ambition. Isabella gave birth to a daughter in prison. I sometimes wondered about the child, another innocent victim in this sordid tale. As for me, I found a new kind of freedom, a freedom from the expectations of others, from the suffocating weight of wealth and status. I found a new kind of love, a fierce, unconditional love for my son, a love that was real and enduring. The scars of Julian's betrayal would always be there, a faint silver tracery on my heart. But they were a reminder not of what I had lost, but of what I had survived. I had faced the serpent and won. I had walked through the fire and emerged not unscathed, but stronger, wiser, and finally, truly free. The Queen had not just reclaimed her kingdom, she had built a new one on a foundation of truth, resilience, and a mother's unyielding love. Our story of betrayal, resilience, and ultimate justice has come to an end. Anya's journey from a gilded cage to a life of true freedom is a testament to the strength of the human spirit. She was pushed to the brink, betrayed by the one she loved most, and framed for a crime she didn't commit. Yet she rose from the ashes, not with vengeance, but with a fierce determination to uncover the truth and protect her unborn child. This wasn't just a fight for her freedom, it was a fight for her identity and the future of her son. If Anya's story moved you, if you believe in the power of truth and the courage to fight for it, please show your support. Like this video, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories of drama, intrigue, and the enduring power of the human heart. Your support helps us bring these incredible narratives to light. Thank you for watching.